Hello, welcome back to my virtual sofa. We are back for another edition of Funding Friday. We've had a couple of weeks break for the summer, so it's really nice to be back, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick Gardner from the National Lottery Community Fund, who's going to be talking to us, amongst other things, about the Climate Action Fund that is available. And we'll get to the details in a minute. Nick, thank you so much for joining me. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what your role is, and let's get chatting about this fund.
It's a pleasure, Debbie. Thanks for inviting me to your virtual sofa. And my name's Nick Gardner. I've just come back from my summer holidays, so I hope your listeners have had some good ones too. I'm head of climate action at the National Lottery Community Fund, which means that I look after our environment strategy more broadly, as well as some of the core climate funds that we're running. And as you mentioned just now, we've just launched a fund, the Climate Action Fund, which I can talk a little bit about during this podcast.
Amazing, thank you. So as a region, my role, I'm the ecosystem manager, the regional ecosystem manager within the NatWest Enterprise team, covering the Midlands and East of England. So we've got 4 physical locations, 4 hubs: Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Birmingham and Warwick. Is the grant that you're going to talk about today, does it cover all of those areas? Is it geographically sensitive?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a UK-wide fund, actually, Debbie. So we are encouraging applications from every country within the UK as well. So that, all 4 nations and within England, all of the regions too. What's interesting is over time, the Climate Action Fund itself is a 10-year fund, and we're now coming into year 3. We've been tracking how many applications we've been getting from different regions. And actually, interestingly, some of the slightly underfunded areas in terms of balancing up the regions are in the east of England and the Midlands. So we are specifically looking for applications in your sweet spot, as it were.
So no pressure, everyone that's listening, pull your finger out. We need some applications from our neck of the woods. That's fantastic. So this is a grant pot of money. This isn't a loan. This is an amount of money that people can apply for. Is it standalone or is it match funded?
Yeah, this can be for completely standalone projects, but we'll obviously also look into and be particularly interested if people have already secured match funding. It's not a requirement to find match funding for it. If it's helpful, I can give a bit of background to the fund itself, and then just run into some of the areas that we're looking to support this year. As I said, it's a 10-year program. It's one of the 3 parts of our wider environment strategy. And in a moment we can talk about that, I suppose. But focusing on the fund itself, it's a £100 million commitment over 10 years for funding, thanks to national lottery players, which will be distributed all across the United Kingdom, as I said. So coming into year 3, we've decided to we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of talking to stakeholders across the country, and decided this year to put a real focus on the intersection between nature and the natural environment and the climate crisis. And of course, there are many linkages there between the two, between the biodiversity crisis, or the nature crisis, as people are talking about, and the climate emergency. So we're recognizing that explicitly, and actually looking for projects this year that will either show how creating a deeper connection with nature in your local area will lead to changing people's behaviours and ultimately lead to a greater care for the environment, or showing how bringing nature back into places which perhaps have lost some of the nature in the places that we live and work. Through doing that, we can help communities adapt to and become more resilient to climate change. So those are the kind of broad kind of topics that we're looking at. And of course, there are lots and lots of types of projects within that. But overall, we've set aside £8 million this year to fund projects on those on that broader topic.
Wow. My head is already spinning with ideas of things that people would potentially want to use this for. In terms of the businesses or the types of businesses that you see applying, are they really sector specific? Are you seeing a lot from kind of the agri-tech or those kind of nature closest related industries? Or can this be, for example, a hair and beauty spa who want to plant a sensory garden that will attract local wildlife? Is it both ends of the spectrum?
It is a really important question, and one that we should clarify as well. The community fund is there to distribute lottery money to projects that primarily are about supporting their local community. So most organizations that are applying have either a partnership in place or some kind of arrangement which is led by a charitable organization or a non-profit making body. We can actually have partnerships which do include profit making organizations, but they would tend to be part of a wider partnership, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
there are further details about who is eligible to apply for the funding on our website, which if people are looking for, it's tnlcommunityfund.org.uk, and you can just click through find funding and you'll quickly get to the Climate Action Fund. But yes, I mean, it is really open to quite a wide range of organizations, and it's definitely not the big ones only or the small ones only. What I would say is that we're looking for most of the applications to come in for between around 300 and 500,000 pounds. So these are quite significant projects. It is possible for the very established ones to put in applications for up to £1.5 million. And also on the flip side, if you have a project idea, you might just be coming forward with something as a development grant, which would help you to develop that idea. And that may be of the order of something like £50,000. So we are talking about some quite sizable funds here. If people are looking primarily to establish, say, a particular location, a sensory garden, for example, there are other pots of funding which might be more appropriate for that. And within our lottery family, we have a whole program called Awards for All, and that's for applications of up to £10,000. The same restrictions would apply in terms of who is able to access that money. And it's not completely ruled out, but just think twice if you are a profit-making organisation as to whether or not you could perhaps come forward with that idea in partnership with or through a charity.
That's fantastic. Thank you for clarifying. And actually, this is probably a great opportunity to talk a little bit more about what the National Lottery Community Fund is, what it's set out to achieve. And you mentioned as well the strategy that you've got moving forward around the climate action work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people know too much about the lottery. So it's obviously been around for just over a quarter of a century now. I remember very well buying my first ticket in the first week where it existed, which puts a certain age on me. But it, over the last 25 years, there have been billions and billions of pounds raised for good causes through the National Lottery, which is a great bonus of why we've got it as a system. Every ticket sale, a proportion of that money goes to good causes, and that gets distributed through one of 12 organizations. We are just one of those 12. Other ones your listeners may have heard of are things like the Arts Council, Sport England, the British Film Institute, etc., etc. So quite a range. The Heritage Lottery Fund. We are as the community fund responsible for distributing around 40% of that good causes money, and that accounts for around about 500 to 600 million pounds every year. So it's pretty significant. It is amazing that every week 30 million pounds of good causes money gets distributed to communities and good causes across the country. And it's just a fantastic thing to be part of, because every day we can see the amazing stuff that happens thanks to people playing the lottery. So where that sort of rings true for us and my particular team working on climate is that within the community fund, we've said one of our big priorities is making sure that communities can respond to the climate crisis. And our wider environment strategy helps us to look both at our own organizational carbon emissions and make sure that we're walking the talk, but also at specifically launching climate funds, which are accessible to all. The idea is that everyone, climate action is for everyone. It's not just for the few. So we really want to make sure that everyone is engaged with the topic. And through our funding, we're able to give project money out to projects all across the country. And so far, we have funded just under 50 projects through this Climate Action Fund in the first 2 years, as well as launching a program called Together for Our Planet last year, where we had a much smaller pot size, but a little bit like Awards for All, and we had well over 1,500 applications for that. So it just shows that there are people all across the country really wanting to do projects of all sorts of different scale and sizes.
Yeah.
And then just the last bit of that environment strategy is that we have committed to looking across all of our funding and making sure that we are being climate aware in the way that we're supporting communities up and down the country. And that may come through in terms of the kinds of information we're asking from applicants to our projects over time, but also making sure that we're using our reach, because we fund upwards of 12,000 organizations every year, to really turn the sector into becoming much more of a climate aware place, and seeing how we on the ground, in the grassroots, if you like, are able to respond to the climate emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. And that data tracking is so vital at this stage, isn't it? And I think COP26 played a really fabulous role in raising awareness, because we held it on our own turf, so to speak, last year. So great to see so many more of these pots of funding being geared towards making a change for good. You mentioned, or you touched upon there, the application for this. How difficult is that application process, and how much help can you give people?
Yeah, so we've tried to make it as smooth and straightforward as possible. Clearly, with the larger grants, we're going to require quite a lot of information and make sure that that money is going to be well spent. But the reason we've done it in a two-stage process is that we want people to just simply give us our idea. So we've got what we call an expression of interest phase. It's a simple set of, I think, 3 questions, but certainly something in that sort of order, which asks really for the broad idea that you've got, how you've come up with it, how you've talked to the community where you would think it would be most appropriate to launch this project, how they've had an input into it as well. So that those are the kind of basic questions. And we have been funding for over 25 years and really have a keen eye out for let's say professional grant applicants. So there are people who do this day in, day out, of course. We are, and they are very capable of putting great projects together, but we are very able to look through and see through some, poorly worded things, but with the nugget of a great idea. We will happily see if we can talk to people to help to progress that too. So I suppose it's hopefully just to put your and your listeners' minds at ease that you don't have to be professionals in the fundraising space to apply for this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's what we really want to encourage, is that we hear from a lot of our entrepreneurs who hear about these types of grants is, well, I'll never be eligible, or it will never be me that gets it, or it's always the bigger organization. So it's really reassuring when people like yourselves come on and say, actually, we need to give this money out. It's been earmarked. We want to help you get it. Just give us all the information so that we can see if we can make it work. So that's really brilliant. Thank you.
That's fine. And Debbie, sorry, just to cut in there. I think the other thing is, we're not just looking for those environmental charities, those environmental NGOs, people who are doing this already. We definitely are trying to look out for some amazing organizations who want to start doing something, or start to bring their community along with them and explore what's possible locally. So yeah, absolutely, it's open for everyone.
Brilliant. Can you, without mentioning any names or giving out any trade secrets, can you give us an idea of the types of projects that have already been funded through this pot that's been going for 3 years?
Yeah, we can absolutely name projects as well, because all of the projects, when they are funded, they become public information. We do put press releases out about them. As I said, we've got almost 50 projects across the country, so it's quite hard to pin down specific examples and favorites. I definitely don't have favorites. We do have projects working across a wide range of topics. So to date, it's been a lot more open, not just focused on the nature and climate link. we've got projects working on transport and sustainable transport options, like a fantastic project up in Chorlton in Manchester, which is led by Groundwork, really trying to sort of see how people's behaviours can be adapted, or people can work with to stop the reliance on cars and look for other options instead, and particularly to boost what we call active travel. So that's walking and cycling. Also projects looking at food growing locally, and trying to change the systems of food growing, not just looking at specific individual examples and projects, but how as a system we can try and encourage more food to be grown closer to where it's consumed. And there's some fantastic projects in Cumbria looking at that. There's an entire Glasgow city-wide project being led by the Food Community Network up there. We've got projects looking at energy, so energy consumption, but also energy waste and energy generation. And that particularly rings true in this time and period when we've got a cost of living crisis looming, is how can we make sure that our communities are responding effectively and trying to cut down any energy wastage in the system, so through energy efficiency programs. And there's a great project in inner city Nottingham called Green Meadow, run by Green Meadows, which is looking at giving educational workshops and visits to homes to talk to people about what they can do to insulate their house. We have projects, what other topics haven't I covered? I can't remember. Waste and consumption, we've got some fantastic projects, and as I think a good example of a project that is not led by an environmental NGO is a small charity up in the northeast called the Daisy Chain, which is looking at how we can repurpose our view towards sustainable fashion, and through their charity shops, how we can repurpose clothing and make it much more attractive to buy secondhand. So that there's a whole raft of projects out there. It's very difficult to provide exact examples. Maybe we should give one or two examples of the nature type project as well that we have. Just recently we have finished up a 5-year program of supporting projects across the UK in partnership with the Wildlife Trust, called Our Bright Future, and there were 30 projects across the country that were supported in that program. And mostly that was looking at how we can reskill young people to have the job experience and the skills to go forward into green careers. So a lot of this is about how the economy is going to change as well, and how we can take the advantages and opportunities of the shifts that we as a society are going to have to make.
Wow, you have literally covered everything from clean transport, micromobility, energy, waste, food chain. That's brilliant. Supply chain. In terms of the other pots of funding that you have, so we've talked specifically so far today about the Climate Action Fund. That's not the only grant funding that the National Lottery Community Fund hold, is it? Where do people go to find out about this wealth of support that's available, and the various eligibilities?
Yeah, as I said, there are other lottery distributors out there, and of course other funders, but particularly through the community fund, we actually have a regional setup. So we have a lot of funding officers who are particularly on the ground and talking to and getting to know organisations locally. And if you haven't come across our funding officers in the part of England where you are, then it would be definitely a good idea to approach people through our website and just to explore the kinds of funding that are available. We have two key kind of ongoing programs of funding. One is for slightly larger opportunities, which is called Reaching Communities. And that's for upwards of £50,000 and up. And then we have the Awards for All, which I mentioned it before, which is for projects of up to £10,000. So those are the kind of two main funding streams, as well as the various thematic or specifically focused funds like the Climate Action Fund that we run.
Brilliant. And then other people, if they fill in the contact form, can have the same mini heart attack that I had when I answered the phone to hear, "Hi, it's Nick from the National Lottery." And I thought all my dreams had come true and I'd perhaps got a winning subscription. Sadly not, but I will keep
I could really play around with that, couldn't I?
Yeah, for sure. So if you send in and make an inquiry, don't forget that you've done that when they call you back. Nick, thank you. That has been a brilliant overview of what you're offering, how people get involved. I guess as a bit of a closing note, what would you encourage people to do as their first step or their next step to find out about these and engage?
I think if this has piqued your interest, there's a couple of things. We have, when you do hit our website, tnlcommunityfund.org.uk, you can go straight onto the funding page, and there is a blog on there, which myself and a colleague wrote, which gives some examples of why we're doing this fund, but also the kinds of projects we're likely to fund. It also has access to all of the details, like which types of organisation are eligible, etc. And we do have people on hand at the end of a help desk, phone number, or also an email, both of which are advertised on the website if you have further questions. And I can promise you there's very friendly staff at the end of both of those. So there's no silly questions, I suppose, is the short answer to that. The other thing is we're running a couple of virtual workshops or webinars for people to find out a little bit about more about this program. They'll each be about an hour long, and we have two on the 23rd of August. So that's at the time we're recording, that's next week. And then one in late September on the 27th of September. Again, the dates and the details of those are online on our funding page.
Brilliant. And I'm happy to add those into the blurb on the recording so that people can navigate and find those links more smoothly and easily. Nick, I guess all that is left is for me to thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. And for any of our listeners, if this is not the grant for you, perhaps you don't meet the eligibility criteria or it's not something you're exploring this year, please don't forget to pass it on, because there will be somebody in your network who can really benefit from Funding Fridays and from this particular grant. When we have these pots of money that have been earmarked, we want to make sure that all of that money goes out the door to the good causes and the fantastic businesses that we know can make use of them. But like everything else, we know that SMEs are spinning all the plates, and maybe they just haven't got round to searching this particular grant fund at the moment while it's active. So, I mean, you've got a good 7 years left of this one. It's not like it's going to run out like some of the other ones really soon, but please don't delay, make contact, find out more, and as we say, please spread the word. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.